The thunderous hooves of a dozen horses echoed across the dusty plains as Willow Thompson clutched her stolen satchel tighter to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs with the same ferocity as the approaching posse. It was 1878 in the unforgiving territory of Arizona, and she had just made the most desperate decision of her 22 years. Faster. Willow urged her mare forward, the animal's muscles straining beneath her as they crested a hill. The satchel contained $50 and a letter her ticket to a new life, a new identity. Behind her, the dust cloud grew larger, and the shouts of angry men grew louder. The town of Promise Creek lay somewhere beyond the horizon. She'd heard whispers of it, a place where a woman could start fresh, where the shadow of her past might not follow. What Willow didn't know was that Promise Creek held more than just the promise of anonymity. It held her future, wrapped in the form of a man she hadn't yet met. As night fell, Willow finally allowed her exhausted horse to slow. The posse's tracks had faded hours ago, lost to the wind and the vastness of the territory. Her hands trembled as she opened the satchel, removing the letter addressed to Miss Charlotte Westfield. The elegant script detailed an arrangement, a teaching position at Promise Creek's newly established school, with accommodations provided. Charlotte Westfield, Willow whispered to herself, testing the name on her tongue. It felt foreign, yet liberating. The real Charlotte had been a passenger on the same stagecoach Willow had traveled on 3 days prior, a refined Boston woman who had spoken excitedly of her new position. When the woman had fallen ill and died unexpectedly at their last stop, Willow saw an opportunity. No one in Promise Creek had ever met Charlotte. No one would know. It wasn't theft, Willow told herself. The dead had no use for opportunities, and she needed this one desperately. Dawn broke as Promise Creek appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley, smoke from morning fires rising lazily into the pale sky. Willow straightened her posture, adjusted her dusty traveling clothes, and practiced her most educated expression. Charlotte Westfield had been cultured, educated at a fine Boston school. Willow Thompson was the daughter of a laundress who had taught herself to read by candlelight. "You can do this," she whispered to herself as she rode down the main street, drawing curious glances from early risers. "You're Charlotte Westfield now." The mayor's office was easy enough to find, the grandest building on the street, with fresh paint and a proper sign. Willow took a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and stepped inside. "Miss Westfield, I presume?" A portly man with an impressive mustache rose from behind a desk.
Mayor Ogister.
"We've been expecting you." Willow summoned her most refined smile. "Yes, thank you for your warm welcome. I apologize for my appearance. The journey was rather more arduous than I anticipated." No matter. We're just pleased you've arrived safely." The mayor gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We've prepared the schoolhouse and living quarters as promised. Term begins in 2 weeks, giving you time to settle in." As Mayor Hollister outlined her duties and introduced her to a secretary, who would show her to her new home, Willow felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this deception could work. Perhaps she could become Charlotte Westfield in truth, leaving Willow Thompson and all her troubles behind. Her new quarters were attached to the schoolhouse at the edge of town, a simple but clean 2-room dwelling with a bed, a stove, a small table, and a bookshelf stocked with primers and readers. For a woman who had spent most of her life in shared rooms or servants' quarters, it felt like a palace. "The town council will convene tomorrow evening to formally welcome you," the secretary informed her. "For now, I imagine you'd like to rest." Left alone, Willow collapsed onto the bed, emotion finally overtaking her. She had done it. She had escaped. She had become someone else. All she needed to do now was maintain the charade. As the sun set on her first day in Promise Creek, Willow began to unpack Charlotte's belongings, elegant dresses and accessories she had taken from the woman's trunk. Among them, she found a journal filled with Charlotte's neat handwriting, detailing her training and teaching methods. Willow read hungrily, absorbing every word. This would be her guide to becoming the schoolteacher Promise Creek expected. A knock at the door startled her. Hastily hiding the journal, Willow smoothed her dress and answered. A tall man with broad shoulders filled the doorway, his hat in his hands. The fading sunlight caught in his light brown hair, and his eyes a striking blue that reminded Willow of the sky after a storm appraised her with undisguised curiosity. Miss Westfield. His voice was deep, with a drawl that suggested he was from somewhere farther south. I'm Preston Xavier. Town council asked me to bring you some supplies. He nodded toward a wagon behind him, laden with firewood, a barrel of water, and several parcels. How thoughtful, Willow replied, trying to sound like the educated woman she was pretending to be. Thank you, Mr. Xavier. Most folks just call me President, he smiled, and something in Willow's chest tightened. I run the cattle operation north of town. Also serve on the school board, which is why they sent me. Wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. As he unloaded the supplies, Willow learned that Preston Xavier was 30 years old, had come to Arizona Territory 5 years earlier, and had built his ranch from nearly nothing. He spoke with a straightforward honesty that Willow found both refreshing and intimidating. People like Preston Xavier didn't typically associate with people like Willow Thompson. But he wasn't meeting Willow Thompson. He was meeting Charlotte Westfield, Boston-educated schoolteacher. Mayor mentioned you came all the way from Boston, Preston said as he stacked firewood beside her stove. That's quite a journey for a lady alone. I've always been rather independent, Willow replied, the lie coming more easily than she expected. And I felt a calling to bring education to the Western Territories. Preston's eyes lingered on her face, and Willow felt a flicker of panic. Could he see through her? Did something in her manner betray her deception? Well, Miss Westfield, Promise Creek is lucky to have you. He placed his hat back on his head. If you need anything at all, my ranch is just 3 miles north. The Xavier brand is well known in these parts. After he left, Willow found herself standing at the window, watching his wagon disappear down the road. Something about Preston Xavier unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made her aware of herself, of her heartbeat, of her breathing, of the flush in her cheeks. She couldn't afford such distractions. Her survival depended on becoming Charlotte Westfield completely. There was no room for Willow Thompson's heart to interfere. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Willow studied Charlotte's journal religiously, practiced her penmanship and elocution, and arranged the schoolhouse for her future pupils. The town council meeting had gone well, with Willow managing to answer questions about her background and qualifications with carefully rehearsed responses. Preston Xavier attended that meeting, sitting quietly in the back, those blue eyes never leaving her face. Since their first encounter, he had found reasons to visit the schoolhouse, regularly bringing more supplies, helping repair a leaky roof, delivering books donated by neighboring settlements. Each time, Willow felt both pleased to see him and terrified that he might somehow discover her secret. The day before school was to begin, Preston arrived with a small package wrapped in brown paper. A welcoming gift, he said, extending it to her. Nothing fancy. Willow unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden apple, polished to a high shine. I thought it fitting for a teacher, Preston explained, a hint of shyness in his voice that seemed at odds with his confident demeanor. Made it myself. It's beautiful, Willow said, genuinely touched. Thank you. Wanted to wish you luck tomorrow. 27 students enrolled, quite a responsibility. Willow swallowed hard. 27 children whose education now rested in her fraudulent hands. Yes, it is. Perhaps sensing her nervousness, Preston added, You'll do fine, Miss Westfield. The children of Promise Creek are lucky to have someone of your caliber. There was something in the way he hesitated that made Willow's heart skip. Did he suspect? Had she made some mistake? That's very kind, Mr. Xavier. Press, he corrected gently. And I mean it. Not many would travel so far to teach in a place like this. Willow looked down at the wooden apple in her hands. Sometimes a person just needs a fresh start. His eyes softened at that. Don't we all? As he turned to leave, Willow found herself asking, will you be attending the harvest dance next Saturday? Mayor Hollister mentioned it's quite the event. Preston paused at the door. I'll be there. Save me a dance, Miss Westfield. Charlotte, she replied, immediately regretting the invitation to such familiarity. And yes, I'd be happy to. After he left, Willow placed the wooden apple on her desk and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She was developing feelings for Preston Xavier, feelings that complicated everything. Because Preston wasn't falling for Willow Thompson. He was falling for Charlotte Westfield. And Charlotte Westfield didn't exist. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and a knot of anxiety in Willow's stomach. 27 children of various ages filed into the schoolhouse, eyeing their new teacher with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Drawing on everything she had learned from Charlotte's journal, Willow introduced herself, outlined her expectations, and began assessing their various levels of knowledge. By midday, her fear had begun to subside. She could do this. The younger children responded well to her patient instruction, and even the older boys, initially the most resistant, showed grudging respect when she demonstrated her knowledge of mathematics. As the children filed out at day's end, the youngest, a little girl of 6 named Emma, presented Willow with a wildflower. You're the prettiest teacher we've ever had, Miss Westfield, she said solemnly. Willow's heart twisted with guilt and affection. Thank you, Emma. That's very sweet. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Willow grew more confident in her teaching, the children began to warm to her, and each evening she studied Charlotte's journal more, incorporating the real teacher's methods and philosophies into her lessons. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, and the entire town seemed to buzz with anticipation for the harvest dance. Willow selected the finest of Charlotte's dresses, a deep blue gown with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She arranged her hair carefully, trying to replicate the elegant styles she had seen in Charlotte's personal sketches. The town hall had been transformed with lanterns, autumn foliage, and bunting. A small band played lively tunes, and tables groaned under the weight of food brought by every family in Promise Creek. Willow entered self-consciously, aware of eyes turning to assess the new schoolteacher. Miss Westfield. Preston's voice came from behind her. You look beautiful. Willow turned to find him dressed in his finest, a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his usual cowboy hat replaced by neatly combed hair. Thank you, Mr. Xavier. You clean up quite nicely yourself. His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. I believe you promised me a dance. The band struck up a waltz, and Preston led her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, his movements surprisingly graceful for a man who spent his days on horseback. As they turned about the floor, Willow found herself forgetting about her deception, about the precariousness of her situation. In that moment, she was simply a woman dancing with a man who made her pulse quicken. Your first week of teaching seems to have gone well, Preston remarked. Emma Watson can't stop talking about you. Says you're teaching her to write poetry. Willow smiled. She has a natural affinity for language. All the children have been wonderful, honestly. Not what you expected from frontier children? There was something in his tone, a subtle challenge that made Willow glance up sharply. I try not to approach life with too many expectations, Mr. Xavier. People often surprise you. That they do, he agreed, his blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. You've certainly surprised Promise Creek, Charlotte. The use of her assumed first name sent a pang of guilt through her. How so? Most folks figured a Boston schoolmarm would look down her nose at our little town. But you've embraced it. Become part of it, even. The music ended, and Preston reluctantly released her. "Would you like some punch?" As the evening progressed, Willow danced with several other men, the mayor, the doctor, a few of the fathers of her students, but her eyes kept finding Preston across the room. He watched her too, she noticed, even as he conversed with others or took an occasional turn around the floor with one of the local widows. Near the end of the evening, he approached her again. "Would you honor me with the last dance, Miss Westfield?" This dance was slower, more intimate. Willow could feel the heat of Preston's hand through the fabric of her dress, could smell the clean scent of soap and something uniquely him. "I was wondering," he said softly, "if you might consider joining me for dinner tomorrow evening. At my ranch. I'd like to show you my operation if you're interested." The invitation sent both thrill and panic through Willow. Spending more time with Preston was exactly what she wanted, and exactly what she should avoid. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. His smile was worth the risk. "I'll come for you at 4 then." As promised, Preston arrived the following afternoon with a handsome buggy. Willow had spent hours deciding what to wear, finally selecting a practical but flattering dress in a soft green that Charlotte's journal indicated was her favorite color. The irony of using the dead woman's preferences to further her deception wasn't lost on Willow. The Xavier Ranch was impressive, a sprawling main house built of sturdy logs and stone, surrounded by well-constructed outbuildings and corrals filled with fine cattle and horses. As Preston gave her a tour, pride evident in his voice, Willow realized the extent of what he had built. "It's remarkable," she said honestly, "to create all this in just 5 years." Preston's expression turned reflective. "I came west with almost nothing after the war. Worked other men's cattle for 3 years before I could buy my own land. Been building it piece by piece ever since." "You were in the war?" Willow asked, realizing how little she knew about him. "Confederate cavalry," he answered, a shadow crossing his face. "Not something I'm proud of now, but I was young, and it was what Virginia boys did. Learned a lot about what matters and what doesn't in those 4 years." The personal revelation touched Willow. He was sharing something real, something painful, and she could only respond with lies. Dinner was served by Preston's housekeeper, a motherly Mexican woman named Rosa, who clearly adored her employer. The food was simple but delicious, and the dining room, while masculine in its furnishings, spoke of Preston's good taste. "Tell me about Boston," Preston said as they ate. "What made you leave?" Willow recited the story she had crafted from Charlotte's journal. "I was teaching at a girls' school. Very proper, very restrictive. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Arizona Territory, something in me knew it was time for a change." "No family to keep you there?" "My parents passed some years ago. I have an aunt, but we're not close." This, at least, wasn't entirely a lie. Willow's own parents had died when she was young, leaving her to be raised by a series of reluctant relatives before she began working as a laundress at 16. "And no young man waiting for your return?" Willow smiled at the barely disguised interest in his question.
"No."
"No young man." Preston's relief was visible. Their loss. After dinner, he showed her his library, a surprisingly extensive collection for a cattle rancher in the territories. "I order books whenever I can. Reading keeps the mind sharp when the body's tired." Willow ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing titles she had only dreamed of reading. "May I borrow one sometime?" "Take any you like, now or later." Preston stepped closer. "I want you to feel welcome here, Charlotte. To know that you have a friend in Promise Creek."
"Friend."
The word didn't seem adequate for the way he was looking at her, for the warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." On the drive back to her quarters, they sat closer than strictly proper, Willow acutely aware of every place their bodies touched when the buggy jolted over uneven ground. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I never saw stars like this in the east," Preston remarked. Out here, it feels like you could reach up and touch them. It makes me feel small, Willow admitted, but not in a bad way, like being part of something greater. Preston's hand found hers in the darkness. Exactly. At her door, he helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for coming, Charlotte. I enjoyed your company. As did I. Willow hesitated, knowing she should say goodnight, but reluctant to end the evening. Preston solved her dilemma by leaning down and gently pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, respectful, but it sent sparks through Willow's entire body. Good night, Charlotte, he whispered against her lips before stepping back. Good night, Preston. As his buggy disappeared into the night, Willow touched her fingers to her lips, savoring the sensation of his kiss. In that moment, she wasn't Charlotte Westfield or Willow Thompson. She was simply a woman falling in love. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern. Willow taught during the day, continuing to win the affection and respect of her students. In the evenings, she often found Preston at her door, sometimes with a book he thought she might enjoy, sometimes with an invitation to ride out to see some beautiful view or to have dinner at his ranch. Their relationship grew, deepening with each shared conversation, each gentle touch, each increasingly passionate kiss. Preston never pushed beyond the boundaries of propriety, but Willow could feel his restraint when they were alone, could sense his desire matching her own. The deception weighed on her more with each passing day. Every time Preston looked at her with those sincere blue eyes, every time he spoke of his admiration for her courage in coming west, every time he called her Charlotte, Willow felt the lie between them like a physical barrier. Fall turned to winter, and Promise Creek prepared for Christmas. The schoolhouse was decorated with paper chains and pine boughs, and the children practiced songs and recitations for the Christmas program. Willow threw herself into the preparations, grateful for the distraction from her increasingly troubled conscience. Preston had become a fixture at school events, his support of education earning him the town's approval as a suitor for their teacher. Willow could see the speculation in people's eyes when they were together, could hear the whispers about whether the wealthy rancher would propose to the refined Boston schoolmarm. The thought filled her with equal parts longing and dread. She wanted a future with Preston, wanted it desperately. But how could they have one built on such a fundamental lie? A week before Christmas, Preston invited her to a special dinner at his ranch. "Wear something nice," he said with a mysterious smile. "I have something important to discuss with you." Willow knew what this something important likely was, and spent the days leading up to the dinner in turmoil. She couldn't accept a proposal based on a lie. But the thought of revealing her deception and losing Preston forever was unbearable. The night arrived, cold and clear with a dusting of snow on the ground, rare for this part of Arizona. Preston collected her in his buggy, wrapped her in warm blankets, and drove to his ranch in companionable silence, though Willow could sense a nervous energy in him. The ranch house was transformed, every surface gleaming, candles lit throughout, a magnificent Christmas tree dominating the main room. Rosa had outdone herself with the dinner, serving course after course of delicious food. Preston kept the conversation light, though his eyes rarely left Willow's face. After dinner, he led her to the fire in the main room, where they sat side by side on a comfortable settee. The moment Willow had both dreaded and longed for had arrived. "Charlotte," Preston began, taking her hands in his. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. I never expected to find someone like you here in Promise Creek, someone educated, refined, yet kind and adaptable to our way of life." Willow's heart pounded so hard she was certain he must hear it. "I've come to care for you deeply. More than care, I've come to love you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Charlotte Westfield, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Inside the box was a beautiful diamond ring, simple but elegant. Perfect for a schoolteacher. Perfect for Charlotte Westfield. But not for Willow Thompson. Tears filled her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. Preston mistook them for tears of joy, his smile widening as he moved to place the ring on her finger. Preston, wait. The words tore from her throat. I can't accept this. Not yet. His face fell. If you need time, it's not that. Willow withdrew her hands, clenching them in her lap. There's something I need to tell you. Something that may change how you feel about me. Concern replaced disappointment in his expression. Nothing could change how I feel about you, Charlotte. The use of that name broke something in Willow. That's just it. I'm not Charlotte. My name is Willow. Willow Thompson. The confusion on Preston's face would have been comical in any other circumstance. What are you talking about? The whole story spilled out her desperate circumstances, Charlotte's death, the opportunity she had seized. With each word, Preston's expression grew more stunned, more hurt. Everything I've told you about myself has been a lie, Willow finished, her voice breaking. I'm not educated. I'm not from Boston. I'm the daughter of a laundress who taught herself to read. I worked as a maid in Kansas City until she stopped, unable to reveal that final piece of her past. Until what? Preston's voice was cold now, controlled. Until I had to run. The son of the house where I worked.
He attacked me.
I fought back. He fell and hit his head. I took money from his desk and ran before anyone could find us. Willow stared at her hands. I don't know if he lived or died. I just know I couldn't stay. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. When Willow finally gathered the courage to look up, Preston's face was unreadable. So, everything our entire relationship has been based on a lie. No, Willow said desperately. The person you've come to know the way I feel about you, that's all real. The only thing that isn't real is my name and my background. Preston stood abruptly, pacing to the window. How can I believe anything you say now? How do I know this isn't just another story? Because I'm risking everything to tell you the truth. Willow rose too, her voice rising. I could have said yes, married you, and kept the lie going forever. But I couldn't do that to you. I love you too much. Love. Preston turned, his expression anguished. How can you talk about love when you've been deceiving me from the moment we met? Because it's the truth. The only truth that matters. Willow moved toward him, but he stepped back, increasing the distance between them. I think you should go, he said quietly. Preston, please, I'll have Rosa drive you back to town. His voice was flat, final. I need time to process all of this. Willow's tears flowed freely now. I understand. The ride back to her quarters was silent and miserable, with Rosa casting sympathetic but confused glances her way. When they arrived, the older woman patted her hand gently. El Jeef has a good heart. He will forgive. But Willow wasn't so certain. The days before Christmas passed in a blur of forced cheer for the children's sake and private misery. Preston didn't come to the schoolhouse. He didn't send notes or books. It was as if their relationship had never existed. The Christmas program went forward as planned, with the entire town gathering to watch the children perform. Willow scanned the crowd repeatedly, but Preston was conspicuously absent. After the program, as parents collected their children and townspeople exchanged holiday wishes, Mayor Hollister approached her. Miss Westfield, a word? The formal address and serious tone sent a chill through Willow. Of course, Mayor. In the privacy of his office, Hollister came directly to the point. I've received some concerning information. A telegram from Kansas City, inquiring about a woman named Willow Thompson, wanted for theft and possible murder. Willow's knees gave out, and she sank into a chair. I can explain. I should hope so. The mayor's expression was stern but not without compassion. Because, right now, I'm looking at a woman I hired as Charlotte Westfield, who may in fact be a fugitive. With nothing left to lose, Willow told him everything, the same story she had told Preston. When she finished, Hollister sighed heavily. The young man didn't die, if that's any comfort. But his family is determined to see you punished for the theft. Relief flooded through Willow, followed immediately by renewed fear. Are you going to turn me in? Hollister stroked his mustache thoughtfully. You've been an excellent teacher. The children adore you. The town respects you.
He paused.
But I cannot condone deception or theft. I need to consider what's best for Promise Creek. I understand. Willow stood on shaky legs. May I at least have Christmas? Before any decisions are made. The mayor nodded slowly. Be at my office the day after Christmas. 9 o'clock. Christmas Day dawned cold and bright, but Willow could find no joy in it. She attended the town's celebration at the church, accepting gifts from her students and their parents with a forced smile, all the while aware that this might be her last Christmas as a free woman. Or her last Christmas in Promise Creek, at the very least. After the festivities, she returned to her quarters and allowed herself to finally break down, sobbing until no more tears would come. When a knock sounded at her door, she assumed it was a parent bringing a forgotten gift or a child wanting to show off a new toy. She opened the door to find Preston. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. But to Willow, he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. May I come in? His voice was rough. Wordlessly, Willow stepped aside. Preston entered, removing his hat, twisting it nervously in his hands. Merry Christmas, he said awkwardly. Merry Christmas. Willow remained by the door, afraid to hope, afraid to move closer. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Preston began, pacing her small sitting room. About what you told me. About everything. Willow waited, hardly daring to breathe. I was angry, hurt, felt like a fool. He stopped pacing and faced her. But then I started thinking about who you really are. Not Charlotte Westfield, but the woman I've come to know. The woman who connects with children. Who reads poetry late into the night. Who looks at the stars and feels small in the best way. Hope flickered in Willow's chest. Preston, I realized something, he continued, taking a step toward her. I didn't fall in love with a name or a background. I fell in love with you. Your spirit. Your heart. The way you look at me like I'm something special. Tears filled Willow's eyes again, but these were different from the tears of the past days. You are something special. So are you, whatever your name is. Another step closer. I spoke with Mayor Hollister this morning. Willow's breath caught. You know about the telegram? Preston nodded. I know everything, and I've made arrangements. Arrangements? To pay restitution to the family in Kansas City, to explain that the situation was misrepresented. That a young woman was defending herself from assault, and that taking the money was an act of desperation, not malice. Willow stared at him in disbelief. You did that for me? Even after I lied to you? I did it because I love you. Preston closed the remaining distance between them, taking her hands in his. I loved Charlotte Westfield. And I love Willow Thompson. Because they're the same person where it matters. Fresh tears spilled down Willow's cheeks. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Your help. Maybe not, Preston agreed with a small smile. But you have it anyway. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the velvet box from their disastrous dinner. I'm asking again. But this time, I'm asking the real you. Willow Thompson, will you marry me? Joy, pure and overwhelming, washed through Willow.
Yes.
Yes, I will. As Preston slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, he whispered against her hair, I loved you before you lied. I love you now that I know the truth. And I'll love you for all the days to come. Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of new beginnings, of a love strong enough to overcome deception and pain. In that moment, Willow knew that she was finally, truly home. The wedding took place on New Year's Day, 1879, with the entire town of Promise Creek in attendance. Mayor Hollister, who had accepted Preston's arrangement and agreed to keep Willow's secret, performed the ceremony in the town's small church, decorated with winter greenery and candles. Willow wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with a crown of pine and holly berries. Preston, clean-shaven and handsome in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle to him. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love and cherish each other through all the joys and hardships life might bring. When Preston slipped the gold band onto Willow's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes clear with certainty. The celebration afterward was joyous music and dancing, food and drink, the community coming together to wish the new couple well. As Willow and Preston shared their first dance as husband and wife, she felt a lightness she had never known before. The burden of her lie was gone. The fear of discovery was behind her. Before her stretched a future with the man she loved, a future built on truth. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" Preston murmured as they turned about the floor. "More than I ever thought possible," Willow replied honestly. "It still doesn't feel real that I get to be with you, that I get to be myself." "Get used to it." Preston's arms tightened around her. "Because you're stuck with me now." As winter gave way to spring, Willow continued teaching, now with the added responsibilities of being a rancher's wife. She split her time between the schoolhouse and the Xavier Ranch, where she and Preston had established their home. The children adjusted quickly to the change, excited that their beloved teacher had married the respected rancher. In late March, as the first wildflowers began to bloom across the range, Willow received news that made her happiness complete. The doctor confirmed what she had begun to suspect: she was expecting a child, due in the fall. When she told Preston that evening, his joy matched her own. He lifted her into his arms, spinning her around the room before setting her down gently, suddenly concerned about her condition. "A baby," he said in wonder, placing his hand on her still, flat stomach. "Our baby." "Our family," Willow corrected, covering his hand with her own. "Something neither of us thought we'd have." As her pregnancy progressed, Willow continued teaching, determined to complete the school term. The town hired a permanent replacement to begin in the fall, with the understanding that Willow might return once her child was older, if she wished. Summer arrived hot and dry, bringing with it the challenges of ranching in the harsh Arizona climate. Preston worked from dawn to dusk, ensuring their cattle had access to water, moving them to better grazing when necessary. Willow helped where she could, her growing belly limiting her activities, but not her determination to be a true partner to her husband. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Preston asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. "Have you thought about what we'll name the baby?" Willow smiled, her hand resting on her rounded stomach where their child moved restlessly. "I have actually. If it's a boy, I thought perhaps Charles after my father." She paused. "And if it's a girl?" "Charlotte." Preston's eyes widened in surprise. "Charlotte? Are you sure?" "I am." Willow gazed out at the land that had become her home. "Charlotte Westfield brought me here. In a way, she brought us together. And though I was wrong to take her identity, I think she would be pleased to know that something good came from her journey west, even if she couldn't complete it herself." Preston placed his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Charlotte Xavier. It has a nice ring to it." In October, as the aspens in the high country turned golden and the first cool breezes hinted at winter's approach, Willow gave birth to a healthy daughter with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. Charlotte Rose Xavier came into the world loudly and decisively, making her presence known from the first moment. As Willow held her daughter for the first time, Preston seated beside her on the bed, his arms supporting them both. She was overcome with gratitude for the twists of fate that had led her to this moment. "She's perfect," Preston whispered, touching their daughter's tiny hand with a reverence that brought tears to Willow's eyes. "She is," Willow agreed. "And she'll never have to pretend to be anyone but herself." Preston's gaze lifted to Willow's face, love and understanding in his eyes. Like her mother finally can. Years passed, and the Xavier family grew and prospered. Charlotte was joined by a brother, William Preston, 2 years later, and a sister, Emma Rose, 2 years after that. The ranch expanded, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Willow returned to teaching part-time when Emma started school, finding joy in balancing her roles as educator, mother, and wife. The story of how Willow Thompson became Charlotte Westfield before finally becoming Willow Xavier remained a secret known only to her, Preston, and Mayor Hollister. To the rest of Promise Creek, they were simply the schoolteacher and the rancher who had fallen in love and built a beautiful life together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Preston surprised Willow with a special gift, a small silver locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children on one side and, on the other, an inscription, "To my Willow, whose truth I cherish above all else." That evening, after the children were asleep, they sat together on the same porch where they had planned their future and chosen their daughter's name. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful in the moonlight, the fruits of a decade of hard work and shared dreams. "Any regrets?" Preston asked, his hand finding hers as it had thousands of times over their years together. Willow thought of the desperate young woman who had fled Kansas City, who had stolen another woman's identity in a bid for safety and a new beginning. She thought of the fear and guilt that had nearly kept her from accepting the love offered to her. And she thought of the moment when truth had finally set her free. "Not one," she answered truthfully, leaning her head against her husband's shoulder. "Every step, even the missteps, brought me here.
To you.
To our children. To a life I never dared to dream was possible." Preston pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Do you remember what I whispered to you that Christmas Day, when we got engaged? For real, I mean." Willow smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "You said you loved me before I lied. You loved me when you learned the truth, and you'd love me for all the days to come." "I meant it then," Preston said softly. "And I mean it even more now." As the stars emerged in the vast Arizona sky, Willow Xavier no longer pretending, no longer hiding, knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the man she was meant to love. The past, with all its deceptions and fears, had faded into distant memory. What remained was the truth of their life together, imperfect, challenging at times, but always, always real. And in the end, that was all that mattered.